All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm Andrea Bernabé. I'll be talking about convergent application on Ubuntu Touch today. Let me bring up the presentation. I'm going to share a presentation with you so we can go through all the points together. All right. So yeah, let's talk about convergent application. First, let me tell you a bit about myself. You know my name, I'm Andrea Bernabé, also known as Fenil. You might have seen me on the Telegram group or on IRC. We might have talked about UI2K apps development. I'm a UX engineer at Canonical. I work in the London office, and basically what UX engineer means and what I do is I work with designers and I help designers with QML prototypes. And in the last few months, I've also been doing working on the UI components of the UI toolkit for Ubuntu Touch, so C++ components as well. I love communities. That's why you always see me online and always try to support the community as best as I can. And I love tinkering with software, and I love open source software. So what we'll be talking about at the beginning will be Ubuntu, which is nowadays a fully scalable OS. It works on everything, basically, going from the cloud to servers to laptops, smartphones, and tablets and IoT. And we'll be talking about convergence in particular. So convergence is a vision that Canonical has, and we'll be talking about, we can describe convergence in 3 ways, let's say. So first of all, convergent means UI applications that have a UI that adapts across different form factors, so across different screen sizes. But convergence also means a UI that applications that adapt based on the input device that the user is interacting the app with. And the third way is actually the one you see in the screenshot here in the mockup, which is using the same device both as your mobile, let's say smartphone device or tablet device, and as your laptop or desktop PC. Just by connecting a mouse or a keyboard, attaching them to your tablet, it becomes a full-fledged Ubuntu computer that you can use for whatever heavy-duty work you want to do. This is another use case for the convergent experience, which is plugging in an external monitor to your tablet so that it becomes, and you can use it as a personal computer. And here I show how the music application, for example, scales beautifully across all kind of form factors, from smartphones to tablet to laptops. The way you develop a convergent application is by going through the Ubuntu SDK, which is the software development toolkit. As a developer, you mainly have 3 choices when using the Ubuntu SDK. You can develop a scope, or a web app, or a Qt app. We're only going to talk about the third one, which is the Qt QML apps, as that's what the convergence is focusing on, and what our talk is focusing on, better said. Why native apps? Because you get the power of Qt, so an extensive platform API and access to all of the API that the platform offers, and also because you have the performance provided by C++ and the simplicity of QML that makes it very easy to develop the UI of your applications. I could also tell you about news about the SDK, but I'm not going to do that because we have an SDK roadmap, and this is basically an ad for it. We have an SDK roadmap session at 6 UTC today, Ubuntu Online Summit as well. So make sure you attend that session as well if you want to know the future of the Ubuntu SDK and a roadmap. Let's now go through some of the components that the SDK team worked on in the last few months, and that will help you develop convergent apps. The first of them is the adaptive page layout. If you've used any UI-TK, UI toolkit, QML UI toolkit in the past, you probably already know a page stack, and you've been used to it. And what adaptive page layout is basically a dual page stack by default, but more in general, it can have an infinite number of columns. So basically, you have one, two, or more columns and more page stacks, and it's a very flexible component because it allows you to scale your app depending on on the size of the screen and on the size of the window, and it lets you show more or less columns based on the size of that window. So it's a way of scaling the UI and changing the layout based on the screen size. And it's a very flexible component. As a developer, you can specify each of those columns how you want them to look like, and any minimum or maximum size, and any other layout attribute that you also get in the row layout from QtQuick, for example. It's got two main methods, which is for each column you can decide whether to add a page on top of that column or on top of the next column. And I'm going to show you a live demo. By the way, I didn't say this, but this is actually a QML application. This presentation is actually a QML application, and it uses UI-TK Ubuntu components. So that's why we can also show a live coding session inside the presentation itself. So this is just an example that shows the adaptive page layout component. Let's suppose the one on the right is your application, and this blank space on the right, and let's create an application and adaptive page layout in it. You see, when the application is narrow, you'll only have one page stack, and if your application scales and the user resizes your application to grow and to be wider, the adaptive page layout automatically switches to 2 columns. So I'm going to show it again. For example, let's say you have a page on a column. When you resize your application, it becomes 2 columns. And since the page was added to the left column, it stays on the left. But for example, let's suppose you add a page on the right column, which is not shown at this moment. Whenever you resize the application to be wider, it goes automatically to the next column, and if you resize it back to be narrower, it goes on top. So all the columns are stacked on top of each other, starting from going from right to left. It's also a convenient component because it gives you automatic, it handles the back buttons for you. That's actually a feature of the page header that we're gonna talk about in very soon, right after this component. So for example, the back button is handled automatically by the header. And another feature that we are trying also to make customizable is that whenever you have multiple columns, all the header have the same height. This was a design decision to have more of a consistency between the headers of multiple columns. But we're actually thinking about making this optional to also be able to handle custom layouts. Let's go on. Let's talk about the page header. So first of all, it's one of the important parts of your application. Of course, it's the header that sits at the top. Again, we're going to show a live demo of this. It's important to say that it has a few interesting features for the convergent world, which is, for example, an extension property which lets you add a few tools and icons right below the header, and I'm going to show this in the live demo right now. Again, it handles the back button automatically, and it supports focus states, which is shifting the focus from one component to the other using keyboard and keyboard navigation. Let's give another quick demo of this. So this is a simple header. You can have multiple header in the same component in the same view. Of course, if you want to switch from one to the other, let's suppose you have an edit header, you might want to have tools, an array of tools in that header. In that case, you might want to use the extension property, which is exactly how these icons at the bottom are specified. And I can show you the code for those actions. It's actually quite short, and it's very easy to add it. Another feature that the page header has is that if you specify a flickable in the header, you can specify a flickable property, and in that case, the header will hide automatically whenever the user flickable item. Whenever the user interacts with a flickable item, if it scrolls up, the header will hide, and if it scrolls down, it will show automatically. Let's go on to the next component. We've got any application, any decent, let's say, application will surely have a list to show some data or whatever. And the best way to do that using the Ubuntu SDK and the Ubuntu UI toolkit is to use list item and list item layout. It's important to say more about what the difference is between the two, as people usually get confused. List item is the component that handles these wipeable actions. That is, it does not handle the content of the list item, but it handles the contextual actions that you want to be able you want the user to be able to perform on that list item. It is a component that has been converted to C++ from QML in just a few months ago in the recent releases of the UI toolkit, and that allowed it to be 16 times faster than the old empty list item coming from the QML list items module that we used to provide in the past. So please, if you're using the old list items module, please do switch to the new list item component coming from Ubuntu Components version 1.3. As I was saying, it provides swipeable action, which is the way to interact with the list item itself and provide contextual actions. I'm going to show you another example how this works. This is just a list of simple list items. So this is the way you access the contextual actions on touch. You drag them left to right or right to left to reveal them. And if you have a mouse attached, so this is one of the convergent features, you don't want to drag the mouse left or right, just the way I'm doing, but it's much more likely that the user right-clicks on the list item to get the contextual actions, and that's already implemented by default, automatically provided by the list item components. It's one of its features. More of the cool features that these components offers. So we can talk about the expansion property. If you want to and a list item to expand because you want it to make space for more content in its container, you have many flags. For example, using the view items attached property, you can specify that you want a list item to expand when you click on it, and when you click on another one, you want the previous one to collapse and the new one to expand. So it's an exclusive expansion, one list item at a time. In this example, I just have a label which is vertically centered, but you might usually want to have the label at the top and add more content below it. Another really cool feature is the drag and drop. which is usually not very easy to implement in QML. With list item, it's super easy, and it's view items attached property. The code is right here. If you didn't see it, let's see. Yeah, this is the beauty of QML presentations. I can just make it bigger. And that's just the way you implement drag and drop using the list item component. It's really easy. You just if the list item drag, you get a list item drag dot moving event, then you don't accept the event. Or if the item has been dropped, so you get a drop event, then you switch the items inside your data model. And the way it works in practice is exactly what I'm showing. So you get beautiful transitions and everything works. That's something really nice that it wasn't as easy to implement before in QML. Again, list item supports focus states and keyboard navigation. So list item is the way you implement the swiping actions, so the contextual actions, the way you implement the content of the list item itself. For example, the label that I've shown here is the list item layout. List item layout is a component that lets you implement the content of list item, and is the perfect body. I called it is the perfect list item body. It lets you basically you specify a list item layout component, and inside that component you put the elements that you want to be laid out in a row. The elements will be laid out following the UI guidelines specified by the design team. So you will have automatic padding between the children of the list item layout, and you will have automatic global padding around the whole list item layout, and automatic padding between the slots themselves. It's all customizable, so as a developer you might want to tweak the layout, and you can do that because we offer padding properties which are overridable and customizable both at the global and slot specific level. List item layout itself already provides up to 3 levels, and they are, again, it's been implemented in C++. The labels as well are laid out using C++, so everything is faster than it was before. And as a proof, I'm going to show you that I'm going to tell you that using a list item with a list item layout with 3 labels inside and 3 items is still 3 times faster to instantiate than the old QML list item, but the old empty QML list item. So if you even compare 3 labels, 3 items, list item layout, swiping actions, whatnot, and you compare it to the old QML list item, the empty one, the new one is going to still be 3 times faster, and that's really good, especially for list view, for the scrolling performance of your list views. So if you're having a laggy application that lags when you scroll your lists, please do move to list item layout, because it's gonna get much better. I have a few examples here of list item layouts. I'm going to show you one of them, the code for one of them. Let's suppose we're talking about the Telegram list item layout. Where is it? Yeah, there it is. You just have a list item, you specify the height, and that's actually that won't be needed in the future. So you have just a list item, then you put a child in it, which is a list item layout. You don't have to implement any label, any text from QML. You have everything provided by the list item layout component. You specify the text of the label, the text of the title, the text of the subtitle of the summary, and yeah, you get all the styling of the text and the font size, as you can see on the right. It's everything's automatic. And then if you want to put something more than labels, then you just specify children of the list item layout. So in this example, I just have a red rectangle, and you specify the position. So you specify whether you want that slot, which is slot being just another name for children of a list item layout. you specify that rectangle to be on the left or the right side of the labels. So in this case, we specify leading because we want it to be on the left side. Otherwise, we would have said trailing, say, change it to trailing, and that's going to be on the right side, so it works. No dim effects. Yeah, that's good. We call it leading and trailing, by the way, instead of first and last, for example, because we also support right to left layouts, which is, for example, the Arabic one. And in fact, as you can see in the Facebook list item, we're using Arabic texts, and the icon goes to the right, and then you have the label and then the chevron, which indicates that you can tap on that list item and push a page on the stack. In that case, the Facebook icon will still be a leading, because it actually in right to left layouts you start from the right. It's still the leading slot. The last component that I'm going to talk about is the scroll view. Basically, it lets you add scroll bars, convergent scroll bars to a view, to a flickable. So your view can either be a flickable or a list view, or whatever other component. For example, let's say you have an image. The scroll view component will automatically create a flickable to wrap it, and it will add horizontal and vertical scroll bars to it. And it's really easy to use. I'm going to show you another live example. And let's suppose we want to add scroll bars to the list item example that we've shown before. It's just as easy as literally wrapping the list view itself in a scroll view. Do it. Just specify the same anchoring. We go to the bottom, and there we go. We have the scroll bar that appeared. I hope you see it on the presentation as well. So the scroll bar is convergent, as in you have a different style of the scroll bar. Whenever the user interacts with the surface by dragging it or by scrolling using 2 fingers, for example, on his touchpad, we're going to just show an indicator which fades out after a couple of seconds. But if the user has attached to his device a mouse, so a pointer device, he can actually use it to hover on the scroll bar and get a full desktop-friendly or pointer device-friendly scroll bar that he can drag. We support all the usual interaction that the scroll bar have for desktop toolkits that the user are used to. And again, we support keyboard navigation using the scroll bar as well, so page up, page down, go to bottom, go to top, and all those interactions. So it's a fully convergent component in that sense. You can use whatever input device and it adapts. So more cool stuff that we can say about the UI toolkit itself. All the styling of the components is customizable. You can do so using the style hint component. I suggest you go and have a look at the API. Recently, we also landed a new updated color palette with semantic names. That, again, there is a blog post about it. Please Google it. And that makes it very easy to keep a consistent visual for your application, even when the user, for example, in the future will be able to change things or customize things or anything like that. There is an input device detection, which is a work in progress, and it will be exposed to QML via an API. And also, for example, we have a minimum touch area for components deriving from abstract button. That makes it so that when you have a button and you have a very small button, let's say 2 grid units by 2 grid units button, the user will still be able to tap on the button because the button will have a touch area of a minimum of 4 by 4 grid units. that again does not apply to the mouse, because it would be awkward if you were able to click on a button and trigger a button by clicking outside of it, right? So again, convergence, we handle touch and mouse differently, and we make it so that the touch guys, the people using touch, also get the best possible experience. And the UI toolkit also supports mnemonics, so the shortcuts and shortcut keys using the action components. How to verify that your app is convergent? This is a short checklist, but it's just a few ideas. So first of all, please don't use pixels. Don't hard code the position or size of elements itself. Please use the grid units, which is the pixel independent unit that we provide as in Ubuntu, in the Ubuntu components. Use the labels text size enum provided by the label component, so that the labels will also scale beautifully across different form factors and different screen sizes and different devices. Make sure you handle focus states, because your convergent user is going to expect to be able to use the keyboard to navigate in your application. So also make sure you handle keyboard UI navigation whenever that's appropriate, of course. Another tip is to whenever you detect that there is a mouse attached to the device, it would be better if you transferred your bottom edge action into a page header. The way the Ubuntu SDK, the Ubuntu UI toolkit does it automatically is that the bottom edge hint component adapts from the touch version to the desktop version, so a clickable version that grows from just a hint to being a button whenever there's a mouse attached. But that's not the best experience. That's a good compromise that we could offer as SDK developers, as toolkit developers, but it would be better if every developer would tweak it so that the main action is actually transferred to the page header. Another important point to talk about is the fact that you have to have a different UX based on different input devices. That's one of the key points of convergence. So as I was showing before, don't mix touch and mouse. Please do act differently and based on whatever input device the user is using. And I don't know how many of you are aware, you probably are, but whenever you interact with mouse areas using touch in QtQuick, that will generate a mouse event from a touch event. And if you don't want that to happen, we also implemented a property in the mouse filter to avoid that. So to avoid triggering mouse areas when you're using touch. Again, it's important that you have a different UX journey whenever, based on the input device that started that journey. I'm going to show an example in the next slides that shows what this means. For example, these are just some mock-ups of the future indicators. I don't think that's implemented yet, but it's on a roadmap for sure, and it's a visual mock-up. This shows what happens to indicators when you open them using the touch. So you drag the indicators down and the drawer opens, and that's the touch interactions. But in a convergent world, you might want to use a mouse or a pointer device to open the indicators, and in that case, you don't want the full drawer to open because it's not very mouse friendly. And in that case, you're going to have something like this. So depending on the input device that starts a journey, which in this case is opening a menu, or it could be, I don't know, opening the copy-paste on the browser, or on whatever text field. If you do it by mouse, you want to show a different interaction than if you do it by touch. And this is, or will be, for the components which are still work in progress, will be automatically handled by the UI toolkit for the components. But if there is any app-specific behavior that requires this, it is your job to make sure your application provides the best experience across all form factors and input devices. Again, I had a slide of the future of the Ubuntu SDK here, but I'm not going to talk about it. Again, please make sure you attend the SDK roadmap session at 6 UTC. I think that's pretty much it for the Convergent apps talk. I don't know if you want to talk a bit about framework as well and the security aspects. What do you guys think?
Well, since we don't have a specific session for those, it might be good to give an overview. I know there's been a lot of interest in some of the new frameworks that are coming out.
Yeah, all right, that's all right. So I'm just going to give a quick overview about some more things which are not strictly UI related. First of all, when you want to publish an application, you have to specify a framework, which is essentially the API that your application requires to run successfully. And a framework is nothing more than a contract between the app and a platform. You just tell the platform that you require that framework to make your app work. And what that means is that if you require a framework and the user that wants to download your app doesn't have that framework, because, for example, he has an older operating system release, he's not going to see that application in the store. So essentially, it's a way to filter applications which are cannot be installed at the store level. There are a few ways you can integrate your app with the platform. Let's first go through the security part. Your application, first of all, is isolated. All the applications are isolated, and they run in a sandbox, so they can only access their own data. And the same applies to APIs. There are some APIs that you cannot access at all, such as the telepathy one. I don't know if this is subject to change, but you cannot currently do it. And there are other things, other APIs such as location, microphone, sensors, camera that you can ask access to, and you can ask the permission to the user to get to be able to use that API. These are just a few examples of opt-in API, so that require user permission, and other reserved API that, as a store, as a third-party application, you cannot automatically get, but it requires manual review by Canonical. You specify the APIs that you need using the manifest file that you get when you create a new application using Qt Creator and using the Ubuntu SDK IDE. The application, as I was saying before, are isolated one from the other, so you only have access to the folders that your application owns. And these folders are all exposed via QStandard paths, which is the API provided by Qt to access these kind of paths. And given that you can only access your data, how do you talk to other applications? The way, this is just an example, a diagram, a picture of how app hardware works. As you can see on the top left, you only have access to the folders, to the paths, which are owned by your application, and not to the directories owned by other application or by the system, such as the documents folder in your home, for example. And at the same time, app hardware makes it it should make it impossible to do stuff like keyboard sniffing and screen grabs and whatnot that your app shouldn't be able to do without the user permission. Yeah, so the way you share data between applications is by using the Content Hub, and that's an API that is designed for that purpose. So whenever your application wants to share something, you can declare your application to be a source of a content type or a destination of a content type. Again, you define your intentions using the manifest of the application, and you also have to specify the APARM or security policy that is required to be able to use the Content Hub. And that is the content_exchange or _source as well, if you want your app to be a source. At that point, it is the Content Hub that will handle the transfer itself. And whenever another application wants to take to import some data from your application's data, you will get a call. It will be Content Hub that will run a callback that has to be provided from your application. So, for example, if you're the developer of the gallery application and the user selects to import, he wants to import pictures from your gallery application because he wants to share them over whatever messaging application, you will be responsible for implementing a selection view inside your application that will be displayed whenever Content Hub wants to import stuff from your app. A few words about the application lifecycle as well. There are essentially two macro states that your app can be in. It's either running or non-running, and there are a few sub-states. So the running states are the focused or unfocused. Whenever the user is using your app, the app will be in the focused state, and whenever it's in background, or it's dismissed, or it's minimized, it will be in the unfocused state. Whenever the app goes to the unfocused state, it could be stopped, it could be reset, which is the stateless state, or it could be killed, for example, for instance, because the platform requires the precious system memory that your application is using. So whenever your application gets killed, for example, because of lack of memory, of free memory, your application should be able to restore the state it was in before it was killed whenever the user opens it again or resumes it. And you can do so by using the State Saver SDK components to look up the API to see how that works and make sure you don't force the user to start from scratch every time he opens your application after it gets killed from the out-of-memory manager. This is just an image.
We have about 10 minutes left, so
yeah, that's right.
I'm not sure how much more you have, but we have some questions in the IRC channel.
I'm almost finished.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a picture with all the states, so you can go from focus to focus and then transition to any of the other ones. And it will be platform duty to send events to your application so that you as an app developer can handle those state transition and make sure you save whatever data you need to save or you restore the state. Deploying your app is very easy. You just create a click target using the IDE, and you plug your device via USB, and you press the green arrow in Creator, and it basically builds the application. It creates a click package, which is a package format which is currently used by Ubuntu Touch, and it deploys to the device and runs it. It's very easy, and it's gonna get much easier pretty soon. Please follow the SDK roadmap session to know why. Internationalization, again, there are a few methods that you can use in your QML application to make sure it's easily it can be translated in many languages so that more people can use it and can discover how awesome of a developer you are. And also have a look at the QML locality documentation that because QML itself provides, Qquick itself provides useful methods. And the last slide will be about publishing your apps. That's very easy as well. You just go to Ubuntu My Apps, register there, upload your click package after you've made sure it's actually validated using the tools provided by the Ubuntu SDK IDE. And then you upload the package to My Apps, and you can publish it. And the community, well, that's you. We wouldn't be here without you, that's what I say. So thank you, and please join the mailing list if you haven't yet. Report bugs, give feedback, because we are there, we do listen. And yeah, for those of you who are in the Telegram apps channel, you do know how much I care about it. Thanks for that's it.
All right. Thank you, Andre. We have a few minutes left. We've got some questions already in IRC, but if anybody's got some last-minute questions, they can get them in now, and we will hopefully have some time to answer them. So going back, the first one is from Nekalesh, and he's asking, is it possible to modify the appearance of the contextual menu? For instance, add icons to the actions. At the moment, they look very basic. So this is going back to the list item context menu you get when you right-click with a mouse.
Yeah. Zombie, do you want to take that? Since you worked on
I can take it, yes. So at the moment, the context menu that you see in the list item is just a temporary solution. It just displays whatever you've given to the action. That's it. Not more than that. You cannot add, you cannot remove things. Whatever you have in the leading or trailing, it will be shown. And that is going to be there until we get the context menu there.
So the list item, or well, the actions that you put in the list items, when you're displaying them as leading or trailing in the list item itself, they have an icon. Would it be possible to get that icon in the context menu also?
Well, as long as we don't have the context menu, there is no reason to do this shaping into this one, right? So we focus more on getting the context menu in, and then you will see those fancy things there.
Okay. And what's the target for that context menu? Is that the next framework or the one after that?
The next session. Join the next session and you will see it.
All right. So join the roadmap session.
Yes. Yes.
If it wasn't clear enough.
All right. Nicholas again is asking, is the scroll view component and the scroll bar component the same thing? Up until now, I have been using scroll bar with the flickable, and that works as well.
So yes, essentially what the scroll view does is one, but it wraps them and it handles the keyboard navigation.
Sorry, so Andrea, we lost part of that answer. Can you repeat that?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can. You just froze for a second.
Yeah, so what the scroll view is basically a wrapper of scroll bars, horizontal and vertical scroll bars, and what it adds is the keyboard navigation, so it's the convergent features. Because the scroll bar itself is not a focusable component, and the scroll view is, and the scroll view is what handles the keyboard navigation. So that's what you want if you want your app to be convergent. And at the same time, the scroll view makes sure that if you have an horizontal and vertical scroll bars, they don't overlap at the corner when both of them show on screen. So that's something else that you don't have to handle yourself if you use a scroll view.
Okay, next one, again from Nicholas. Where can I find more information about focus states and keyboard UI navigation? And also, are there any sample apps which illustrate focus states handling?
I think if you really want to see what components are actually supposed to do or how they should behave, then you should check with the UX specs. However, ideally, you don't have to do anything in your application. Just put the components there and press the tab key or back tab key, and you will see a focus ring around or inside the component, which will tell you where is the key focus at the.
Yeah, I guess it means if he's developing some custom component or something. Because in the UI-SDK components, that's handled automatically by the component themselves.
Yeah, so the focus ring itself is defined in the style, so you wouldn't be able to draw that focus ring for yourself. However, if you want to have your custom component which does some focusing or shows the focus state, you would need to have that one drawn by yourself.
How about if you wanted to implement like some global keyboard shortcuts in your app? Where would that go to get focus?
That goes to the actions. That goes to the actions, and you can specify shortcuts in the action. The same goes with the mnemonic. So if inside the text of the action you specify an ampersand, the next character is going to be underlined, and that will be the mnemonic. So you press Alt and that key, and that will actually activate the component or trigger the action.
Okay, and those are any action you define, or the actions that you specifically put like in the header?
Yeah, in the action API, you have it. So whenever you use an action, that is going to have that shortcut, both shortcuts and the mnemonic.
All right. The next question is actually from me. Andrea, you talked a little bit about the app lifecycle, and what you described was how it is currently on the phone, and I'm wondering if that's going to change either when you're running this on a traditional desktop or when you're running it in desktop mode from a mobile device.
So as far as I know, please the other guys may intervene if they know better. As far as I know, when you're in window mode or when you're on desktop, the way it works is it uses the visibility of the window you're looking at. So if a window is completely hidden, that app will be paused, 6 stopped, just the way it's paused on the device. That's how it worked the last time I've heard about it.
All right, the next one is from our friend Stuart, and I'm not sure if this is the right crowd for this question, but he's asking how he can apply for a manual review of an app which uses a privileged API. Do any of you happen to know the policy behind that in the store?
You might want to ask that. You might want to ask Poppy about that.
Or ask Martin Albacetti.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last question is from Alan Bell. He's asking, with the keyboard shortcuts, are they in the right place to be localized?
But I'm not sure I get the question.
Yeah, right place to be localized.
Alan, can you specify that a little bit more? But it sounds like he's asking if you can maybe change the keyboard shortcut depending on the language being used.
The mnemonic, yes. The shortcut, if you do a binding definition for the shortcut itself, depending on what is the actual local, you can, of course. But there is no automatic shortcut localization as far as we know. So if you specify that for a component that it should react on Control S, that will react on Control S, depending independently on what is the local. But for the mnemonic, it is the string which defines what is the actual shortcut which will trigger the action. So there you can, in different local, you can just underscore a different letter, and that will be the shortcut for that local.
All right, and the last question for this session is from Alan again. He's asked, if you open an indicator using touch, can you still interact with it with the mouse? And if you open the short indicator with the mouse, can you still interact with it by touching it?
Yes, of course. Otherwise, it would be quite awkward to use. You would have to every time undo whatever you've done with the touch and do it with the mouse to interact with it. So yes, you can. And the idea is that whenever you open a menu with the touch, you're more likely to interact with it with the touch. But of course, you can still do it with the mouse.
All right, and that ends our time. I want to thank Andrea for jumping in and saving us here, because there was some miscommunication about who was going to lead this session. So he kind of stepped up last minute and offered to run the whole thing. And as I said, we were winging it, and it was awesome. So thank you, Andrea, for that.
Thank you very much. I hope you appreciate it, guys.
Jambor, Tim, and Zoltan for joining us also. And again, go to the SDK roadmap session that's happening later today. All right, thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye,
guys.
Thank you, guys.